My HOA blocked my driveway to teach me a lesson, and then a tow truck accidentally taught them one instead. Now, before the driveway incident, my HOA and I already had history. Not criminal history, just the kind of petty suburban warfare that happens when you refuse to panic over grass height. They hated my truck, my workshop, my string lights, my existence in general, and leading the campaign against me. Karen. Of course. Karen treated HOA rules the way medieval kings treated royal decrees. Every conversation sounded like she expected background trumpets. So when I ignored her latest complaint about my non-uniform driveway aesthetic, she took it personally. Very personally. It started on a Tuesday morning. Karen marched up my driveway carrying a clipboard. Never good. She said dramatically, "Your vehicle placement has become a recurring concern." My vehicle placement? My truck was parked in my driveway, you know? The place specifically designed for vehicles. I nodded slowly. Okay. She pointed at my garage. The visual alignment is disruptive to neighborhood symmetry. Neighborhood symmetry. Lady, we live in a subdivision, not the Pentagon. I tried to end the conversation politely. Karen, my truck is on my property. She crossed her arms. Community standards override individual preferences. That sentence should honestly come with warning labels. Then she delivered the line and threatened me. If you refuse cooperation, the HOA will intervene. Intervene. Over parking. Amazing use of adult life. The next morning, I walked outside with coffee in hand and stopped immediately. My driveway was blocked, completely. Orange cones, temporary barriers, an HOA maintenance trailer parked sideways across the entrance. I blinked twice, because surely nobody would actually block someone's driveway. Then I saw the sign, temporary access restriction, to my own house. And right on cue, Karen appeared, arms crossed, extremely proud of herself. "What is this?" I asked. "A corrective measure," she replied dramatically. Corrective measure. Like my driveway had behavioral issues. "You blocked my car in." She nodded calmly. "This temporary inconvenience encourages compliance." I stared at her. "You trapped my truck to improve symmetry?" She smiled slightly. "We're creating accountability." I genuinely couldn't believe this was real life. "Move the trailer," I said. Karen shook her head immediately. "Not until the violation is resolved." Violation. Again. My truck was parked in my driveway. Then she hit me with another incredible one-liner. Rules only work when consequences become visible. Consequences. For parking at home. Now the problem with HOA drama is that neighbors treat it like live television. Curtains started moving instantly. People walking dogs suddenly slowed down. Dave from across the street leaned over and whispered, "Did they seriously blockade your driveway?" "Yes." He stared at the trailer. "That feels illegal." Very illegal. I called the HOA office. No answer, of course. Then I emailed photos of the blocked driveway. No response. Amazing professionalism. Meanwhile, Karen kept pacing proudly near the cones like a tiny parking dictator. I walked back outside and said, "You can't block emergency access to someone's property." Karen waved dismissively. "This is temporary." Temporary stupidity is still stupidity. Then things escalated. Because later that afternoon, I actually needed to leave. Important appointment. And now, my truck was completely trapped behind the HOA trailer. I walked outside already annoyed. Karen saw me immediately. "The restriction remains active," she announced dramatically. I pointed at the trailer. "Move it." She shook her head. Compliance first. I stared at her for a full 5 seconds, then smiled, because suddenly, I had an idea. I pulled out my phone. Karen looked confident, very confident. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Solving the problem." Then I made one very important phone call. Not police, not the HOA, a tow company. And suddenly, Karen's confidence started fading. About 30 minutes later, I heard the most beautiful sound in suburban history. Beep, 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 tow truck, big one, bright lights, massive metal lift, rolling slowly into the neighborhood like karma on wheels. Karen saw it immediately, and her entire posture changed. "What is that?" she demanded. I smiled. A solution. The driver stepped out calmly, looked at the trailer, looked at the cones, then looked at me. "You the property owner?" "Yes." He nodded once. That was all. Karen rushed forward dramatically. "You cannot remove HOA equipment," the driver shrugged. "It's blocking a private driveway," Karen pointed wildly. "This is an authorized restriction." Authorized by WHO? Certainly not reality. Now tow truck drivers have seen everything, absolutely everything, so the second I explained the situation, his face changed immediately. Not confused, amused, deeply amused. "You're telling me," he said slowly, "they trapped your own vehicle in your own driveway?" "Yes." He stared at Karen, then at the trailer, then back at me. "That's bold." "Exactly." Karen stepped directly in front of the trailer. "This property is under HOA operational control," she declared dramatically. Operational control. "Lady, this isn't a military occupation." The tow driver folded his arms. "Does the HOA own the driveway?" Karen hesitated. "No." "Then move." Boom. Now by this point, the entire neighborhood had noticed. People came outside pretending to check mail. Dog walkers stopped walking. Garage doors opened suspiciously slowly. Dave walked over holding popcorn. Actual popcorn. He whispered, "This is the best HOA meeting we've ever had." Honestly? Fair. Karen pulled out her phone dramatically. "If you tow this equipment, there will be legal consequences." The tow driver didn't even blink. "Lady," he replied, "the legal consequence is usually for whoever blocks the driveway." Direct hit. Karen.exe flickered visibly. Then another SUV pulled up. HOA president. Greg. A man who constantly looked like stress had ruined his hobbies. He stepped out, already sweating. "What's happening?" he asked. Karen immediately pointed at me. "He called a tow truck." Greg looked at the blocked driveway, then at the trailer, then slowly closed his eyes, like his soul briefly left his body. Greg walked over quietly. "Karen," he whispered. "Yes?" "Why is HOA equipment blocking his driveway?" Karen looked offended by the question. "We implemented corrective access restrictions." Corrective access restrictions. That phrase deserves prison time. Greg rubbed his forehead hard. "You can't trap residents in their homes." "Thank you, finally, one sane human." But Karen wasn't finished. "He refused compliance," she argued dramatically. "Action was necessary." Greg stared at her. "For parking in his driveway?" Silence. Beautiful silence. Then Karen said the worst possible thing. "The truck looked disruptive." Greg physically looked older after hearing that. And then, another patrol car arrived. Because of course it did. The officer stepped out looking confused immediately. Tow truck, trailer, crowd of neighbors. One furious Karen. Honestly, it looked ridiculous. The officer asked, "Who blocked the driveway?" And every single person there pointed at Karen, instantly, like synchronized swimming. Karen stepped forward dramatically. "This was a temporary HOA compliance action." The officer blinked. You blocked access to a private residence? Karen nodded proudly. To encourage accountability. The officer stared at her for a full 3 seconds, then finally asked, Do you hear yourself when you say these things? Dave almost collapsed, laughing. The officer turned to the tow driver. Remove it. That's all he said. Beautiful words. The tow driver grinned immediately. Chains attached, hydraulics lifted, trailer raised slowly into the air. Karen looked absolutely horrified. You can't tow HOA property, the driver replied instantly. Watch me. Legend. Absolute legend, as the trailer rolled away. The neighborhood watched silently. Karen stood frozen beside the cones like a defeated parking villain. Then came the final blow. The officer handed Greg a warning regarding unlawful obstruction and emergency access concerns. Greg looked exhausted. Karen looked furious. And I? I finally backed my truck out of my driveway. Slowly, peacefully, like a free man. A week later, the cones were gone. The barriers disappeared. And suddenly, the HOA stopped caring about driveway symmetry. Funny how that works. Now every morning when I back my truck out, Karen watches silently from across the street. No clipboard, no speeches, just pure defeat. And honestly, nothing looks more symmetrical than karma.